systolic volume of the heart, but it stimulates the autonomic nervous system, the baroreceptor reflex, which causes the stimulation of the cardiac stimulatory center and sympathetic nervous system. So in a normal person, there would be increase in the heart rate, increase in the blood pressure, and by which the cerebral perfusion is maintained. We know that the intracerebral pressure is very important, and this is maintained by the vascular tone, and therefore patient does not have any kind of fainting or dizziness. But unfortunately, in a patient who is having neurogenic hypotension, because of sympathetic denervation, the insufficient norepinephrine response would be there. So BP would not increase, almost a minimal change in the heart rate, and this will lead to reduction in the cerebral perfusion pressure. Because remember, the cerebral vessels have a beautiful auto-regulatory mechanism, but unfortunately, because of sympathetic denervation, there would be no auto-regulation. And once the intracerebral pressure decrease because of this decrease in the blood pressure or pooling of the blood in the lower extremities, patient will complain of lightheadedness, dizziness, chakkar, and these kind of things. And this is very well explained from this beautiful cartoon. So you can remember, see, this gentleman is lying down, his blood pressure is 120/85, so he is fine. And this is the middle cerebral artery Doppler, which is showing this Doppler flow, which is maintained of 55 centimeters per second. And this is a very good middle cerebral artery blood velocity to maintain the cerebral perfusion pressure. Cerebral perfusion pressure is defined by the systolic pressure minus the intracranial pressure. But suppose this patient stands. So on standing, his blood pressure reduces drastically. You can see almost around 40 to almost 32 millimeters of mercury decrease in the blood pressure of this gentleman. And by this, his intracranial pressure to maintain the MCA blood velocity is significantly reduced, just 28 centimeters per second. And this is very low to maintain the cerebral perfusion pressure. But again, once he sits down, though his blood pressure is only 95/62, but it is sufficient to maintain the cerebral perfusion pressure. You can see the MCA velocity is 46, which is sufficient to maintain cerebral perfusion pressure. So you need not to go back to 120 to maintain the cerebral perfusion pressure. This is important. In neurogenic hypotension, there is a critical threshold below which, if the systolic blood pressure grows, the CPP or central cerebral perfusion pressure decrease, and patient would have orthostatic hypotension. And this is much worse in patients who are elderly, who are having chronic disease like diabetes, or who are on medications. Because we know that with elderly, the vascular stiffness increase. Moreover, the baroreflex sensitivity to the change in the pressure also diminishes, which decreases the afferent connections or afferent stimulus to the stimulatory centers. And moreover, the beta adrenal receptor mediated response also decreases. Therefore, elderly more than usually 60 age are more likely to develop hypotension. And there are numerous other risks, and especially because we as a diabetologist or endocrinologist deal with patients with diabetes, this is one of a very common cause of silent deaths also, I would say. Cardiac autonomic neuropathy. This is also called the dead in bed syndrome. Patient sleeps well at night and in morning he is found dead. This is again because of autonomic neuropathy. And the orthostatic hypotension, I would say, will be the first sign to diagnose cardiac autonomic neuropathy. I have already elaborated about the cause of the orthostatic hypotension, but always check. Drugs are the most common cause of orthostatic hypotension, whether it may be either the alpha blockers or the clonidine or even the vasodilators or even diuretics. Patients sometimes, because of maybe the erectile dysfunction, maybe on some PD inhibitors. Tricyclic antidepressants are also a very common cause of orthostatic hypotension. And remember, whenever you see elderly patient, refrain from using TCAs because they cause severe postural hypotension. And certain medications, if a patient is having Parkinson's, he is on levodopa, that can also lead to orthostatic hypotension. Definitely, volume depletion can cause orthostatic hypotension because of diarrhea, dehydration. We know that, or certain kind of other neurogenic disorders like Parkinson's or Guillain-Barré syndromes. We see autonomic dysfunction, though not so common in GBS, but around 5 to 10% of patients still can have autonomic dysfunction. But remember, I'm more interested in the secondary causes of orthostatic hypotension, which includes chronic kidney disease, diabetes mellitus, cerebrovascular disease, and alcoholism, and even certain autoimmune disease and amyloidosis. Now, how orthostatic hypotension affects? Remember, this is a cause of mortality. So, in this ARIC study, which is a large study, the hazard ratio was almost 2.4. So, you can remember there was 2.5 times increased risk of mortality if a patient is having orthostatic hypotension. And this is consistent in almost all these studies. And they have also shown that 5-year mortality is around 1.5 times more in those patients who are having orthostatic hypotension. So, moreover, in short-term mortality, these patients can have more falls, more fractures, and therefore they fear from walking. It also impairs their mobility, and it can have significant bearing on their social structure and social isolation. So orthostatic hypotension, which is a common disease cascade, maybe because of heart failure, arrhythmias, or because of atherosclerosis, all these things can lead to a poor prognosis in these patients. Remember, other cardiovascular complications are also associated with orthostatic hypotension, like atrial fibrillation or atrial ectopy or cardiac remodeling abnormalities. So we should just remember these kind of abnormalities in these patients. Specifically, I would be talking about orthostatic hypotension in diabetes patients. So this was a study which was published in 2016, in which they retrospectively just want to know what is the effect of orthostatic hypertension on 10-year mortality or all-cause mortality. And they found out that orthostatic hypotension was associated with myocardial infarction in these diabetic patients with odds ratio of 10.6. And also, there was increased risk of stroke in these patients, in patients who are having diabetes, and there was strong association with peripheral arterial disease, whether they are type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes. So you can see almost 1 in 3 patients of diabetes, whether it is type 1 or type 2, have orthostatic hypertension. So whenever you see a patient of diabetes, always check for their blood pressure, especially in the standing and the supine position. So this is just the risk of higher prevalence of nephropathy, retinopathy, and peripheral neuropathy in these patients with orthostatic hypertension. So this suggests that if you are getting a simple sign that is orthostatic hypertension, it's likely that your patient is having other microvascular complications also. How to diagnose? Most importantly, recognize the symptoms first, because patient will complain of chakkar. That is simple. That is can mean any language, and even a layman can say, "Doctor साहब मुझे खड़े होते बड़े चक्कर आते हैं." And this is reported as dizziness, some kind of wooziness. खड़े होते हुए ऐसा लगता है कि बस सर घूमने लगा है और vertigo. Syncope is a more severe form of this lightheadedness or pre-syncope. Fatigue. Some patients can have significant fall, which can also reduce the pressure in the central retinal artery, which can cause visual blurring, which can be retinal. Even occipital ischemia can be seen because of the decrease in pressure in the posterior cerebral artery. Cognitive impairment, and this is a common sign that is called coat hanger headache. This is neck and shoulder pain, again because of significant postal hypotension or decrease in the pressure in the arteries above the level of the heart. This is called coat hanger headache, especially in the shoulder region. And dyspnea in the upright position can also be seen in severe hypertension. This is a simple barometer of hypertension, like we know about hypoglycemic barometer. This is a symptom barometer of low blood pressure. So 90 by 60, less than 90 and less than 60 of diastolic, 90 of systolic is said to be hypotension. Initially, patient would have nausea and dizziness, but patient might faint if the diastolic falls less than 50. Patient can also have confusion if the diastolic falls less than 45, or patient can also die because of orthostatic hypertension or hypertension when the blood pressure falls less than 50 of systolic. Just today, when I was taking rounds in the private ward, I saw a patient. She was a type 1 diabetic. She was the wife of a doctor. She already had a CKD in transplant. And after transplant, she was having a significant fall of 80 millimeters of mercury. She was hypertensive because of CKD status. So her initial blood pressure was 170, but on standing, her systolic fell down to 90. So it was a 90 millimeters mercury fall in blood pressure. So we were just wondering what are the causes. So one of the causes that we found in her was anemia because she was CKD. And another cause because she already had 15 years of type 1 diabetes. So cardiac autonomic neuropathy was again one of the cause, and CKD status. So there was many causes. So you can sometimes have many causes in a single patient of orthostatic hypertension. Always check for blood pressure greater than 20 and greater than 10 of diastolic after 3 minutes. Usually suggests that patient is having orthostatic hypertension, but always check for heart rate if possible, whether the heart rate increase on standing or not. If does not increase, it again suggests sympathetic denervation also. Always check the patient prior medications what he is receiving. If possible, you can do an ECG. That will be useful to rule out some cardiac causes of orthostatic hypertension. In this patient that I am talking about, we also did a 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, because we have seen patients with pheochromocytoma and cardiac stunning that can also cause orthostatic hypertension. And now to the practice, we have facilities for autonomic function testing. So we test for autonomic functions, especially cardiac autonomic functions, in all our patients of diabetes, and we use Ewing's criteria for that, in which we test for Valsalva, we test for hand grip maneuver. So I know that this might not be possible at other centers or peripheral centers, but this is a very useful tool for diagnosing cardiac autonomic neuropathy. So the heart rate and blood pressure decrease. So you can have a low BP with low heart rate response, which can be very easily seen. So if the less than 15 beats per minute suggests that the patient's heart rate has not adequately increased on standing, so it suggests autonomic failure. This is very important. Change in position does not accompany symptoms sometimes. As I was saying, that many of these patients might be absolutely asymptomatic. So you have to check for the blood pressure and orthostatic hypertension. And then we grade these patients. And this is a simple grading tool. You can just remember patients who are having just infrequent symptoms. So they might not complain of symptoms, but still unrestricted standing time, they might have some symptoms, and they have only mild orthostatic hypertension of around 20 to 30 millimeters fall in standing blood pressure. It is called grade 1 hypertension. Grade 2 is said when they have symptoms only on more than 5 minutes standing time with a 30 millimeter drop in the systolic blood pressure. It is called grade 2. And grade 3, even just within 5 minutes of standing, the patient has a significant fall in significant symptoms and has 30 millimeters drop in systolic blood pressure, or it significantly impacts his daily living. This is called grade 3. If a patient cannot even stand for a minute without symptoms, that's a severe grade 4 orthostatic hypertension, and this patient might need a very curious evaluation. Now, coming on to the last part of my presentation, that is more interesting, and I would say that this is more of a physiological kind of management. You can manage almost all your patients even without drugs, without any pharmacological interventions, just by keenly taking a proper history and examination, and then giving a simple advice to the patient. The first and foremost is modification of patient's medication. So any drug which the patient is receiving which cause either volume depletion like diuretics, or it cause vasodilation, whether it may be clonidine, alpha blockers, or these drugs, you should try to modify or stop if possible. But this is the most important part of treatment of orthostatic hypertension, that is non-pharmacological intervention. So whenever a patient is having hypotension, and most commonly the patient have hypotension just early in the morning when they rise from the bed, first time in the morning. So you should ask your patient to drink at least 16 ounces, that is around 470. I would say around 2 steel glass of water without any additive drink early in the morning, which can significantly improve, because I told around 500 ml of the blood is pooled once we stand. So if you take 500 ml of extra this water around 15 minutes before standing, that will be a very useful thing. Avoid any triggering situation like rapid standing. So we always ask the patient to first sit down on the side of the bed and then gradually stand. Stand motionless for some time. Avoid any hot environment because it can cause peripheral vasodilation. Avoid large meals because again it can cause peripheral vasodilation, and prolonged bed rest are to be avoided. Increase water intake. Salt intake is very pertinent to maintain intravascular volume, which can prevent orthostatic hypertension. Physical conditioning, and this is very important. Ask your patient if they can do certain resistance exercise in order to maintain the skeletal muscle mass, which can squeeze the peripheral vessels and just rush the blood from the peripheral veins to the heart. So this is called physical conditioning or physical counter pressure measures. And we usually ask our patient to have at least 2 pillows. So they should have around 10-degree tilt of the head during sleeping. That can also help. Elastic stockings, I would say that, be very honest, this is the most effective step to treat orthostatic hypotension, elastic stocking, and it has been seen that it significantly reduces the symptom of orthostatic hypotension. But suppose patient, you have done all these things, but still the patient does not improve. Yes, pharmacological interventions also have a role. Recommended drug by European Society of Cardiology or ACC/AHA are midodrine, fludrocortisone, or droxidopa. There are some less established drugs like pyridostigmine and atomoxetine. I will just discuss these. But remember, anemia correction is very important. So we also use erythropoietin to maintain a HB hemoglobin of around 12, which has been shown to improve orthostatic hypertension. In certain cases who are having significant diuresis, we use desmopressin. Octreotide for mainly postprandial orthostatic hypertension. Only and only in postprandial orthostatic hypertension has been found to be useful. Sometimes combination therapies. So this is what I mentioned. First, non-pharmacological measures. Avoid any triggers, exercise, use physical maneuvers to raise blood pressure, use stockings in the leg, compressive garments, sleep with head of the bed elevated, rapid tap water ingestion for symptomatic orthostatic hypertension. If still symptomatic, add first-line drug like midodrine. You can also add agents if there is no contraindications, fludrocortisone also. Now coming on to the guidelines, what does guideline recommend? So this is the ACC/AHA 2017 guidelines, and they say that if a patient is having neurogenic orthostatic hypertension, midodrine can be beneficial in patients with syncope, and it significantly improves symptoms of orthostatic dizziness, and there is dose-dependent effect in improving the standing blood pressure. But sometimes it can associate with side effects. I'll just tell in future slide, but you should just tell your patient they can have some scalp itching. This is a common effect of midodrine. Remember, some piloerection, so they might complain that their hair has risen, or urinary retention. So especially in a patient who's having benign prostate hypertrophy, you might avoid these drugs. Droxidopa is again another, I would say, a dopamine congener that is found to be beneficial in patients with syncope due to neurogenic orthostatic hypertension. So this is the European Society of Cardiology guidelines. They have also mentioned midodrine, but remember, the first few steps always remain the best steps because they are class 1 recommendations like hydration, salt intake, and avoiding any situation which can lead to volume depletion. Modify antihypertensive drug, use certain kind of physical maneuvers, especially support stockings and head up tilting more than 10 degrees, and midodrine as class 2 recommendation by European Society of Cardiology. This is again just a repetition of what I have seen, but this is a great recommendation. So abdomen binder, as I was telling, is a very strong recommendation, which includes even the stockings. Sodium intake, the salt intake is a weak recommendation, but quality of evidence is low, but still it is useful. Taking water or clear fluids, and the compression stocking, though it is weak and very low evidence, but it is found to be very useful in our patients. The drugs, yes, they have a high quality of evidence for preventing the drop in blood pressure on standing, and recommendations are strong for midodrine. The last part, because I want to highlight the role of midodrine in orthostatic hypertension. So first we should know how does it act. So these are few drugs like atomoxetine, pyridostigmine, and droxidopa. I'll not go into the detail. Droxidopa is just a congener which is converted to norepinephrine and binds to the postsynaptic and norepinephrine or sympathetic terminals, and here it causes vasoconstriction. Midodrine directly binds to the sympathetic terminals or adrenergic receptors. So it is alpha-1 adrenergic receptor agonist, and it has very weak beta receptor agonistic activity. So it mainly causes vasoconstriction, and therefore it prevents the fall in blood pressure on standing. Remember, this is just about bioavailability. So it achieves a Tmax of 20 to 30 minutes. And this is another derivative of midodrine, which is metabolized. Midodrine is metabolized to desglymimidine, and which has a Tmax of 1 hour. So the T-half of midodrine is almost half hour, but its derivative or its metabolite is 3 hours. Usually midodrine is used once a day, but in certain patients it can be used even twice a day, depending upon the symptomatology of this patient. And almost 91% of this drug is excreted in the urine. When do we use? We use midodrine in patients with neurogenic orthostatic hypertension, especially those who are having autonomic neuropathy, cardiac autonomic neuropathy, in patients with diabetes. Patients who are having congestive heart failure, you have maintained the intravascular volume, but still they are having orthostatic hypertension. It can be used. Elderly patients, yes, you can use orthostatic hypertension. It is safe if there is no contraindication. Maybe hypertension, which is seen in intensive care. Hypertension due to CAN and diabetes, I would say, in my practice, is this the most common indication of using midodrine. Dose is usually 2.5 milligram, and that is usually given around the bedtime, around 3 to 4 hours before the bedtime. So this is depending upon the TF of the drug. So in cardiac autonomic neuropathy, I would say this is a very serious complication, and I'm already doing work on cardiac autonomic neuropathy. We are following all our patients with diabetes, especially of Charcot's foot, because it is associated with autonomic neuropathy, and we have already published the data regarding the mortality of these patients. It is around threefold high if they are having cardiac autonomic neuropathy. And this is one of the study published in 2018, which showed fivefold increased risk of CV mortality in those patients who are having CAN. And even in the DCCT addict trial, around one-third of patients of type 1 diabetes also had cardiac autonomic neuropathy after 20 years of diabetes duration. And remember, orthostatic hypertension is one of the symptomatic manifestations. If a patient complains of postural dizziness, it is CAN, and it is more likely to be severe or advanced CAN. You should not ignore his symptoms. Treatment is very simple, as I've already discussed, and even in the type 2 patient in ACCORD trial, those patients who had CAN, they had around 2 times increased risk of mortality if they had CAN. So this is very important. You can have a subclinical phase of CAN where there is only decreased heart rate variability, which you can assess only by test. In early phase, patient would have only palpitations as a complaint, like ghabrahat, which is a resting tachycardia. In advanced stage, patient would have orthostatic hypertension and silent MI. So patient would have MI without any chest pain. So this is again CAN. Remember, therefore, orthostatic hypertension is very important, and ADA also now recommends treating aggressively orthostatic hypertension, and you can treat your patients with sympathomimetic drugs like midodrine, which can be up titrated gradually. We usually start with 2.5 milligram, and you can go up to 5 or even 10 milligram, which has been studied in many studies. So this is the meta-analysis that I found out, and this is very interesting meta-analysis which included all the studies. It showed that the systolic blood pressure change from supine to standing was less if you are adding midodrine. Mean change in systolic blood pressure was only 4.9 millimeters of mercury. So you can see that this midodrine was favored in patients who were having orthostatic hypertension. Moreover, mean change in mean arterial pressure was also less on standing. Even mean arterial pressure was only 1.7 mmHg reduced as compared to in patient with postural hypertension. You see a 30 millimeters fall usually occurs, but it is hardly 4.9 if you are using midodrine. So change in the standing systolic blood pressure before and after giving midodrine, you can see was 21.5 millimeters of mercury. This is a very interesting finding, and moreover, they also studied the patient-reported outcomes, because at the end of the day, patients should feel well. So they found that if you add midodrine to your patients, the patient-reported outcome, there was significant improvement in the patient-reported outcome. So almost all of these patients were satisfied, and this was statistically significant as compared to adding placebo in these patients. So midodrine has been studied by many articles, which is published in JAMA, American Journal of Medicine, and all have shown that midodrine significantly improves outcomes in patients with symptomatic orthostatic hypotension and in patients with autonomic failure. But before prescribing midodrine, always remember some certain contraindications. And one of the contraindications that I fear is uncontrolled hypertension, because midodrine causes vasoconstriction. It can lead to slight increase in blood pressure. So if a patient is having uncontrolled blood pressure, you should avoid. Patient having severe organic heart disease like mitral valve stenosis, you should avoid. If patient is having already history of stroke, recent stroke, or cerebrovascular occlusion, you can avoid. Patient with severe renal insufficiency, post-rate hypertrophy, because it can lead to urinary retention. Proliferative diabetic retinopathy, you should avoid again because it can lead to vasoconstriction. Patient with pheochromocytoma, absolute contraindication of midodrine. Patient with hyperthyroidism, again, contraindication. Narrow angle glaucoma, it can worsen with midodrine. These are one of the few contraindications. So at the end, I would say that orthostatic hypotension is common, and it's common only if you diagnose it. And its diagnosis is very important because it is associated with higher risk of mortality, and patient will not complain. You have to check for it because almost 1/3, even 1/2 of the patient may be asymptomatic. And CAN is the common cause of orthostatic hypotension in diabetes. So you have to evaluate for CAN. After non-pharmacological measures like water intake or the head and raise or the salt intake, pharmacological measures like midodrine are useful because they increase vascular tone, and it is now class 2C recommendation by ESC and ACC/AHA, and it significantly improves postal symptoms in your patients of orthostatic hypertension, especially in patients with diabetes. So thank you, and back to Dr. Rishi sir for discussion. Rishi sir and Dr. Vinay, we can have a discussion. Sir.
Yes. It was very nav topic. I never heard, as you said in the beginning. I think the time is short. We can have a couple of good questions that have come. I would like to share. This is the common question that you answered, but for discussion sake, Dr. Mukesh is asking how common is orthostatic hypertension in diabetes and in cardiac diabetes hypertension. How common is orthostatic hypertension in diabetes with cardiac morbidity? You answered, but in a line or two, you just address this.
Yeah, exactly, sir. So with increasing duration of diabetes, the orthostatic hypertension significantly increases. And I would say that almost 1/3 of patients of diabetes have orthostatic hypertension. And if the patient is already having some kind of autonomic dysfunction, maybe pseudomotor dysfunction or erectile dysfunction, almost 2/3 of these patients, 60 to 70%, would have orthostatic hypertension.
We are missing, it means lot number of people. We treat on the basis of clinical background, but as you have mentioned, we should, as far as possible, if not possible, cardiac autonomic testing, if we can do simple lying and standing blood pressure testing.
Exactly.
That will help us. Another interesting question is, you have mentioned the treatment. What is the role of desmopressin?
Yes.
Somebody has Dr. Dinesh is asking, what is the role of desmopressin in this?
Yeah. So desmopressin is prescribed again in patient with resistant orthostatic hypertension, and there is a lot of contraindication for desmopressin, because remember, if a patient, most common cause what we see of orthostatic hypertension is in diabetes patient who already have a prior history of CAD, ischemic cardiomyopathy, who has a poor ejection fraction. So in these patients, the desmopressin is absolute contraindication because that can lead to fluid overload. So desmopressin is required only in resistant orthostatic hypertension once you have used all kind of non-pharmacological measures, and then you have also tried certain other drugs like even midodrine, I would say, or the other drugs are not available. I have also used fludricort in few of these patients, but yes, not in patient with acute kidney injury or CKD. And desmopressin also is avoided in patients who are having chronic kidney disease. So there is limited use of desmopressin, and yes, it is orally available. You can challenge it, you can do it, but remember, hyponatremia is a concern with vasopressin. So you need to monitor with sodium. But with midodrine and other drugs, that is not a concern. So in elderly patient already on certain kind of drugs for congestive heart failure, added desmopressin would be a great challenge.
I think your answer invited another question. You mentioned about fludrocortisone. When should it be used in clinical practice? Because prior to that, we have been using this only. So would you address about this?
Yeah. So, sir, fludrocortisone we are using in patients who are having 1 grade 3 postural hypotension. So grade 3 means patient who's having significant symptoms. Symptoms start within 5 minutes of standing and greater than 30 millimeters fall in systolic blood pressure. Second, a patient who is not having CKD, patient who is not in volume overload, patient who does not have congestive heart failure, patient who is not on diuretics. So you are also absolutely right, sir. Fludrocortisone we are also using in our patients, but what I have seen is that sometimes it is a challenge to monitor fludrocortisone in these elderly patients. So patient who is having uncontrolled blood pressure, I'll not use fludrocortisone. So again, very limited use of fludrocortisone. We have to pick and choose these specific subset of patient. The young patient, like maybe 40, 50, without any prior comorbidity, but having orthostatic hypertension, yes, fludrocortisone is useful. But we have to monitor.
Can we add midodrine and fludrocortisone together if needed, if patient is poorly responsive?
Yes, sir, because both have entirely independent action. One is a vasoconstrictor and one is definitely a different mechanism. We can definitely add both.
And I'm asking a very real question, Dr. Ashu. What are the side effects? You mentioned where we should not use it, but what are the side effects of midodrine? That is a very common thing.
Yes, sir. Very common side effect. What I have seen is skull pitching that I am doing.
Okay.
हमारे सामने वो ऐसे ऐसे करेगा, हमें लगेगा पता नहीं क्या कर रहा है, but almost 40%, this is seen in studies with midodrine that 40% of these patients have significant skull pitching. Moreover, urinary retention is again one of the side effects that I am worried about, especially in elderly patient. So these are common things that we need to avoid in these patients.
Otherwise, this seems a safe salt. This seems a safe salt.
And very importantly, electrolyte disturbance. So that I am worried if we are using Fludricort, desmopressin.
Yes, that's true. I mean, another question is similar from Dr. Shashikant. Can we give midodrine in elderly patients with BPH? You answered, but I think just highlight it once again.
So
BPH and midodrine in elderly.
Yeah, so for alpha-1 agonist action, it is known to cause urinary retention. So that's the challenge. If patient is having significant symptomatic BPH, don't use midodrine. It's avoided. It's better to avoid midodrine.
Yeah, another question from BPH comes if BPH is controlled by people are taking medicine for that.
So that is a challenge because for BPH we'll give alpha blocker and this is alpha agonist. So why to add this? So
better to avoid.
Better to avoid.
Yes, that's good. There is another question. Does midodrine reduce the mortality? Do we need to rule out secondary causes like pheochromosis? You have already met. Does it reduces the mortality? This is the question. I mean, this is an interesting question. I appreciate.
So there is no data that has shown that midodrine improves mortality. Even the meta-analysis says it is given only and only for improving symptoms. Because remember, cardiac autonomic neuropathy is almost irreversible. Only the pancreatic transplant has been shown to reverse autonomic neuropathy. So it does not address the pathophysiology of the autonomic neuropathy. So it does not reduce mortality, definitely.
But I think one thing I can add, Dr. Ashu, if you permit, it would definitely be reducing the morbidity. It will reduce the fall. It will reduce the fractures. It will reduce the hip transplants, spine surgeries. I mean, there's so much, and the insecurity that patient develops, and especially who are living alone. So this is, I think, a useful tool.
Very true, sir.
A lot of questions. I mean, you spoke so nicely. So I'm asking, these are all interesting questions. Dr. Prakash is asking, patient recurrently developing hypertension during dialysis and baseline blood pressure is 90 to 100. Here, what drug to use?
Sir, in dialysis, the cause of blood pressure or hypertension is entirely different. This is just a volume shift. This is an intravascular volume shift. So what we need is for pre-dialysis management is very important. Patient should be volume deplete before going into the dialysis room. I don't see the role of any kind of drugs, especially like midodrine, because it will further lead to a problem once the patient comes out of that dialysis room because of vasoconstricted state. The intravascular volume would be further a challenge. So midodrine does not have any role. and no drug would be useful. I would say just replete your patient with good volume before going to dialysis.
Some people are asking about cost. At the cost of what's about cost of, and second thing is how long this should be given. This is another question that comes in my mind.
Sir, what we have seen in our, I would say, our clinical scenario, that this is a very safe drug. We have studies even up till 2 years, 3 years. It can be safely given for quite long time, but it is given mainly for symptoms. So until the patient is symptomatic, you can continue midodrine. For our patients, we have seen that after maybe 6 months to 1 year, patient usually either improves on its own, maybe because of improvement in anemia. We take other measures like the stockings that we provide to these patients. So usually midodrine is not required after a period of 9 to 12 months, but it is safe drug, can be given for a long time.
I think what I'm expecting and what I would suggest that if you are using in diabetic population, control diabetes very nicely, and a subcomponent of autonomic neuropathy is reversible. So maybe with the reversibility of autonomic neuropathy, you can wean off with the salt. Cost-wise, I think I would request Dr. Vinay to come. Another question, interesting question being asked by Dr. Manisha, how to choose or prefer between fludrocortisone and midodrine. I think you've already answered. Midodrine at any time is drug of choice. So, Dr. Shantanu Verma, can we use midodrine in patient of CAD managed by CABG?
Yes, sir, definitely. If a patient is stable, patient does not have an acute heart failure, it can be managed, though it is midodrine is causing vasoconstriction. But the CAD, which is already had a CABG, is not a contraindication of using midodrine. It can be used because patient must be on already other kind of drugs for management of CAD. Yes, in acute heart failure, in patient with acute ACS, midodrine should not be used, should be avoided.
I think we have done, and you answered very nicely, and it was pleasure being with you. And I ended up learning lot many things. One thing, I think, the last question, alcohol. Two salts you mentioned. So I noted down quickly, 10 seconds. PD5 inhibitors you mentioned. So would you comment on that?
Yeah, problem with again PD5 inhibitors is because this is prescribed in patients who are having erectile dysfunction and all. So using midodrine, it can sometimes worsen the things because it causes vasoconstriction. So we are on one hand we are giving PD5 inhibitors, and on top of that we are giving alpha agonist. So that is a challenge. So
and alcohol I think alcohol is basically a vasodilator. So
exactly.
So alcoholic should not be treated by midodrine. Consume limited alcohol or no alcohol. I mean, this is possibly like the answer. With this,
first we should stop alcohol because there is no point in adding midodrine if the patient is alcoholic and having significant peripheral vasodilation.
Yeah. Treat the cause rather than symptoms. Treat the fever.
Yes.
I think with this we are reaching at the end, and it was truly enjoying to be with you, Dr. Ashu.
Thank you, sir.
Nice seeing you though virtually, and you spoke to the same way as you used to speak. Enjoyed, and thank you so much. And I think I'll ask somebody from Sun to come and say goodbye and have a very nice weekend and a safe weekend. Weekend starts now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Pleasure, always pleasure being with you. Because when I saw your name, I thought it's midweek. I'll say yes. I mean, two things that motivated me: your name and the topic. So thank you being with us, and thank you being enlightened. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. So thank you for a complete Q&A session. It was very interesting. We got many queries from your session as well. And like Dr. Rishi already mentioned, sir, it was such a nice talk that everybody was glued to the screen. So thanking you once again, sir. And we do have Dr. Vinay also now. One thing, one question, sir, which you were asking about the cost of therapy. So on behalf of Sun Pharma, sir, I would like to share that we have our brand, which is now available in the market. So it is costing 48 rupees per tablet. It is the most economical brand currently available in the market right now. Over to Dr. Vinay.
Thank you, sir. It was indeed pleasure listening to you and learning in depth from you. And on behalf of Sun Pharma, I'd like to thank you for your valuable time and giving this clarity in this management of orthostatic hypertension. And also, I'd like to thank Dr. Rishi sir for joining us and moderating us through this academic quiz. It was a pleasure and honor to have you both of you this evening. And as we sign off, I'd like to thank our esteemed audience for their valuable time and participation in this academic platform and keeping it more lively. We look forward for your continued support and meet once again for another enriching academic session from Sun Pharma. As we conclude, we wish you all a very happy evening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Nibun.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.